true of almost every app we're going to talk about today is that the number one thing is the app's not going to do this a great job by itself. It will do better if somebody's there with the kid, engaging the kid, asking questions along the way, modeling with them, and just reasoning with them and keeping that live interaction is going to make every app more effective. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dyslexia Discussions More. I'm Dr. Tim Conway. I'm a neuropsychologist, peer-reviewed published in dyslexia and neurodevelopmental disorders, peer-reviewed published researcher in neuroimaging, fMRI, brain imaging technology, peer-reviewed published in neurorehabilitation, which is how do you rebuild the brains and brain skills and brain function when there's been brain damage of some type. Can you rebuild the reading skills? Can you rebuild the spelling skills? And I also have companies that help take some of this peer-reviewed research and put it into services. So it gets to moms and dads and adults and kids and all different ages. And while we have the nowprograms.com edtech company that brings 4 programs globally, we have students who've been in Malaysia, India, Singapore, the UK, Canada, USA, and we're rebuilding either reading and spelling skills in that phonological system or the comprehension system, because just because you read doesn't guarantee you comprehend. Or we're rebuilding the grammar and writing system, or we're and I say rebuilding, I should say, or we're building, because for some folks it's never been built, or we're strengthening or building that mathematics skills as well. Contrary to that is our medical clinics called the Morris Center, themorriscenter.com. There we have a team of healthcare professionals. These are brain scientists who are expertly trained in language skills, that's the speech pathologist, sensory motor, visual motor, mood regulation, attention focus, that's the occupational therapists. And then anxiety, behavior, mood depression, behavioral control, executive function, all those kind of behavioral pieces. That's the clinical psychologist, school psychologist role in those clinics. And there they do intensive work to strengthen and empower those skills. Part of the reason for doing this dyslexia discussion podcast is we don't want parents to settle for less of just accommodations. Accommodations aren't good enough. We can do better. Don't settle for just supports. Supports don't change the skills. We want supports that actually make weaker skills into strengths. And don't look for just the reliance on assistive technology, because assistive technology means you're always going to need it. And if this was a permanent injury like blindness or someone who's born deaf, then yeah, assistive technology is going to be needed because we don't know how to change those skills. But all the learning disabilities, whether it's math, reading, or composition writing, all of those have the potential to be greatly improved and changed a lot. So Stephen Yearout and I today are just going to give you a basic overview of some apps, because the goal of the apps is more exposure, more training, more practice, maybe even more personalized. But some apps take different approaches than others in how they actually are geared towards instruction. Some apps start up here at the actual content instruction, and some apps are lower level at the phonics instruction, and some apps are actually below that. And those are actually down at the pre-phonics, which means the sound basis first and the letters later on. Stephen, I just gave us a broad overview. How are you doing today, and how are things in big Texas?
We got a lot of stuff going on in Texas right now. We're in the middle of one of our legislative years, and a lot of people down there talking about education and funding, special education. We got asked to come down on Monday to help talk and give our testimony also. So Amy and I are going to go down there on Monday and help support our families and children that have disabilities, and make sure that they get the education that they rightly deserve, and they have a constitutional right to.
Yeah.
So I mean that's our civic duty as parents, as Americans, to make sure that our kids, all kids, it doesn't matter what level your ability or disability is, that all kids deserve an education, have a right to an education. And it's got to be more than just, hey, we gave you that opportunity. It is make sure that all of our kids can be the best version of themselves and
100%.
get the most out of what we're paying our tax dollars for,
Yeah,
which is, to educate the next generation of the people who are going to run this country.
absolutely. And I think that's a great lead in, Stephen, to where we're at for the podcast today, which is, can apps help that educational instructional purpose? Now, full disclosure, conflicts of interest, potential bias. Stephen and I both get a paycheck from Now Programs company. And we're going to end the podcast talking about an app that company has built called LipLetter Land. But our goal is not to promote one app. Our goal is to just give it a really unbiased, or as unbiased as possible, overview of what we've learned about 5 other apps. We're going to talk about Khan Academy Kids. We're going to talk about Reading Eggs, Learn to Read. We're going to talk about the Learn to Read Duolingo ABC app, the ultra popular ABCmouse. I think people really love that name as well. I think it's a killer name. And then there's also another called Homer Fun Learning for Kids. And then lastly, we'll talk about LipLetter Land. And we'll just describe some of the functions, some of the goals. We had a developmental educator who has specialist expertise in education, more than 20 years in the field of education, and bachelor's degrees in education and certifications in elementary and middle school education. We had him do a deep dive in each of these apps. We thought about bringing Mr. Harris on board onto the podcast today, but unfortunately, if you bring Harris to talk about these apps, Stephen, I'm pretty sure could talk an hour about each one. And we just don't have that kind of time. So we've taken Harris's detailed review and condensed it down to some like top key elements and key points on each of the apps. That sound fair enough, Stephen?
I think that's a pretty good description of it.
Got it. So top of the list, we've got Khan Academy. And for those of you who don't know, Saul Khan is a dad who wanted to actually make more educational resources more available. And he started making videos to help his daughter, who I think was having trouble learning math. Is that right, Steve? Math was the first area. And then people started finding out about his YouTube videos or educational information, started asking access to it. Then he realized, it seems like lots of kids can use these resources. And so Saul Khan has done a tremendous job building a great academic resource to families. And this is now not like Khan Academy, the YouTube video-based delivery of services and information. This is a animated app. From what we understand, it's more like classroom instruction. It's their Reading, Math, and More app. And it's got really great graphics. It's got great animation in there. The characters are talking to you. There's a little quick precursor test where it's trying to see if the kids can touch and drag on the screen. Can they touch different points on the screen? Can they follow simple directions? It's kind of an early pre-check. And then it gets on into some basic vocabulary measures there as well to see what words does the kid understand. And then even gives you some cues and feedback like, hey, this might be a little tricky. And it kind of prompts your child to think about what's going to happen next. So from the Khan Academy app, the different details that we see happening in there, there's some mathematics instruction. And it might be, progression of ones to base tens. And it's even some prompts even if you don't count. So help kids who are needing to learn how to count. So it might have 4 objects on the screen and it says touch each of the hats and it counts with you. 1, 2, 3, 4. It says, there's 4 hats. And then fireworks go off, animation to keep the kid engaged. But then they also go into some vowel lessons, some consonant lessons. They're doing some drag and drop pieces with words. They're doing some first letter finding. And they're also looking at some clues like coloring slowly kind of fade to a gradual release model that kind of keeps you engaged in what's happening in the app itself. Stephen, comments, thoughts, updates, information about that as well?
So I would be very surprised if the viewers, listeners have not heard of Khan Academy. Sure. Because this is the program that the majority, I know here in Texas, the majority of the ISDs here use Khan Academy in their classrooms every day. So from what I've seen, this is based off of all of their lessons and directing instruction from their app-based platform.
Gotcha.
My kids used Khan Academy, growing up, when they were struggling in math or especially when they couldn't get, when they got into algebra,
Right.
they were using Khan Academy. So, I mean, this is definitely something that parents should, I would say parents should take advantage of, because this is a platform that their kids already know. The instruction is very similar, if not identical, to what they're used to in the classroom. So, and again, there's 1,001 different apps out there for education, so we can't review all of them, right? So we went and looked at the top 5.
Yeah.
And I say top 5, and not in any order, and not by anybody's measurements or anything like that. Just the top apps that people have heard about. So
they've got popularity, they've got ratings. Like Khan Academy Kids has had 101,000 ratings, and it's got 4.8 stars. That's pretty powerful rating. That means of the people who take the time to rate it, it's made for kids age 0 to 5. So it's supposed to be the earlier education app. It's a lot of guidance, a lot of instruction. There's some phonics in there. There's some memorization in there, exposure to content. There's some book storytelling. It says, let's see what happens at the end, and tries to get the kid engaged in the story. They try to model some sounding out of words, like the word beans. They've got a buh, they got an e, they got an ns. And some educators will not like that they actually put 2 sounds together as if they're one sound. And other people won't care. It's just showing the kid how to sound out pieces. But there's mostly some passive instruction. There's a little bit of direct instruction. But it's an overall generally engaging app to expose your kids to literacy and expose them to some math concepts as well. True of almost every app we're going to talk about today is that the number one thing is the app's not going to do this a great job by itself. It will do better if somebody's there with the kid, engaging the kid, asking questions along the way, modeling with them, and just reasoning with them, and keeping that live interaction is going to make every app more effective.
Well, I mean, that really goes down to computer apps, and even in the Dyslexia handbook that Texas has, it talks about computer-based learning really is it's a complement. It should be an add-on or an addition to the classroom instruction. But classroom instruction is always paramount. It's always first.
Yeah.
And then you use everything else as supplemental learning aids. So don't think that, hey, I'm just going to grab an app, no matter which app it is, and I'm going to stick my child in front of it, and that's all I need to do, because that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to work out real well.
We're not there yet. There are going to be apps that actually engage with your kids. There are going to be AI-based apps where it's an avatar that actually talks to your kid, and your kid answers questions. And the apps are going to get to the point where they have speech recognition. They've got the ability to interact with a decision tree that's programmed into the AI of the app. We're getting there. It's not far away. And the nowprograms.com company is hoping to build some of those ourselves. After Lip Letterland is going to come another version that's got a little bit more engagement. And we're aiming to get to the point where we actually do have some AI-based engagement where it's interactively discussing and questioning and Socratically thinking, because the best way to help engage your child is engage them in deep thinking, reasoning. Is this the same as that? Which one is this and which one is that? And that questioning, getting them to respond and choose, that gives a lot more engagement. The frontal lobes are engaged. This is like the conductor of the orchestra. It's really pulling parts from visual and auditory to pull the pieces together. So always know that the apps today by themselves are going to be informational, but I also have to caution and say, American Academy of Pediatrics still recommends no screen time until at minimum age 3.
Took my thunder.
Well, we'll hit the same thunderbolt. No screen time really until no sooner than age 3. It's not beneficial. It's not the same level of engagement, and it actually is more likely to do more harm than good. One study I saw showed that if a child has an hour of screen time a day, on average, they'll miss out on about 10,000 words that someone could have been talking to them with when you add up those 30 hours, over the time, you're missing on language exposure. You're missing conversation, discussion, exploration. And so the app's actually really going to hinder that language development because the brain is a experience-dependent plasticity organ. The more experience it gets, the more it can build the skills. But if nobody's really talking to you and nobody's really gauging you through it, you're not going to get as much experience, and it's not going to really help you have the same kind of impact. And we appreciate Mr. John Alexander and his support on good stuff, impactful and life-changing now. And John, if you don't know him, does life-changing his work himself through Reichert House and other groups to help empower kids. So we thank you for John for that input and that support. Stephen, let's jump on to the next one. Let's go over to reading eggs. Now, reading eggs, lots of different price points. And I'm not really going to get into the pricing, the subscription, all that kind of stuff, but it's geared for 4-year-old and above. On the Apple Store, it's got 4,300 ratings, and it's 4.6 stars. It's really targeted to actually be teaching phonics, some memorization, and some phonemic awareness. And it does that through alphabet games, spelling games, some phonics activities, some word puzzles, some nursery rhymes, and about 4,000 storybooks. So like, this is the app. If you want your kid to be involved in a lot of stories, you got 4,000 books right here on this app with pricing that ranges somewhere between $10 a month all the way up to, I think it's like $70 for a year. So maybe steeper for some folks, but others, but 4,000 books is quite a lot of access to material. They've got Reading Eggs Junior, which is 2 to 4-year-olds for pre-reading skills, little phonemic exploration, little alphabet knowledge, fun alphabet game activities, some videos, some read-along books. Then they've got Reading Eggs for ages 3 to 7. This is where they see that children are taking their first steps in learning to read. You're going to do more work on phonics. And for those who don't know, phonics means letters. It's the alphabet letters and practicing going that visual symbol with the acoustic sound that goes with it. So what's that symbol? What's that sound? What's that symbol? What's that sound? It's beginning to match that visual and auditory connection together. And that's one way to begin to do some early reading. In contrast, what we'll talk about last with Lip Letterland, it goes to a level below because all of those phonological skills don't build with the alphabet. The phonological skills for most kids from 0 to 4 build at the spoken language level with no visual alphabet whatsoever. And that's really, we're going to talk about the neurology. Where does it come from? How does the brain build that phonological skills if there's no alphabet letters? And it's really just a fascinating part of how the brain works. Now, lastly, Reading Eggs, Learn to Read, also has a fast phonics for 5 to 10-year-olds. More systematic, more synthetic phonics programs to help emerging readers build some key phonics skills. Like, what does AI say? When you see a PH, what are you supposed to say? When you see a KN, do you say kanak, or do you say knock? And really beginning to build some of those phonics skills. Stephen, thoughts on that, where we're at so far? Thinking about that app, and it's a little bit different than Khan Academy Kids, a little bit different focus.
Yeah, it's more focused on the reading aspect. Well, I mean, not more focused. It is solely focused on reading and the beginning stages of reading.
Yes.
Like you said, typically when we start looking at where do we want to be when what elements do we want in our reading programs, in our games that we're putting in front of our kids.
Right.
That's where we really need to start looking at what elements are in there, how are they putting them together, how is it really benefiting the kid from step 1 all the way through actual reading.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think that's a really good key point and a key differentiator between Reading Eggs, Learn to Read, which the name pretty much says what it does. It's learning to read app. And Khan Academy is more of the exposure to some reading activities and some math activities. So it's reading, math, and a little bit more. And so I think that's really well paralleled about how those two are a little bit different. Notice too that some of the apps give free trials and some don't. So you have to know what you're getting into when you download it. It's best to read ahead of time and look and see. Of the apps we're going to talk about today, 4 of the 5, 4 of the 6 have, no, I got it wrong again. Sorry. 6 out of 6 give you a free trial, but 2 out of the 6 require you to enter a credit card in before you start the trial. So just be aware of that. Even though it asks for the credit card, it's not going to charge you if you delete the app before the end of the trial period. So in our example with Lip Letterland, the trial's 14 days. If you download the app, put in your credit card, play it for 10 and quit, you are not charged. There's no charge for that. So others, you want to be sure you know what that cutoff is, because it's not always easy to get a refund if you pass that free trial period. So the other thing about Reading Eggs Learn to Read, our educational expert says they love the graphics, they love the entertaining aspect of it. They've got a video to start explaining some things. It's a lot of words and word story based lessons and exploration. They do actually try to do a little bit of assessment and figure out where your child might be and what might be the right level of their program to start at. Whereas I believe Khan Academy Kids is really just kind of taking you through all the lessons. Lip Letterland is going to do the same thing. You can't skip ahead. There's no jump into level 3. Lip Letterland is just like Khan Academy, which is you start at level 1 and everyone goes from level 1 to level 10. You don't skip anything, so make sure you've got all those skills built and you've been exposed to all of them. So know that there's just a little difference in how they approach those pieces as well. I think that's about all we got about Reading Eggs. And oh shoot, our tech guy's asleep at the wheel. We're supposed to be throwing up images of these apps as we talk about them. Where's our tech guy? Hey, there we go. There's Reading Eggs Learn to Read. Apologies, forgot about cueing him in for that. All right, so yeah, so you can get a visual of that one. And there's Khan Academy with his little bear and the fun animals. They all have great graphics in these apps these days, and the kids love the graphics. They love the coloration of it. They love, how it looks. And this one is iPhone and iPad. Let's go back to Reading Eggs. Does it say, iPhone and iPad, either one? You can use either one of those. That's great. And then let's go ahead and jump on to the next one. Let's throw up the image that we go for Learn to Read Duolingo ABC. Now, for those of you who don't know, Duolingo is one of the first free multilingual apps for adults. And later, they actually built a kid version. The adult version, I've lost count, Stephen. I think they have like over 50 languages in the adult version. The adult version is completely free. It'll teach you how to sound out words, spell words, speak words, read words in one of 50 different languages. And they keep adding more languages because they've kind of community sourced the language experts to help build each different language they add into the app. Steve, have you ever played the adult Duolingo, the multi-language version?
I haven't played it, but I do know that there's school districts that actually provide services to adults, like parents. And a lot of them come in, like other programs that are out there that teach you, a second language.
Yeah.
They'll allow their families that are non-English speaking families to come in and get proficient in English through these type of programs.
Yeah, and that's great because then the parents can take them and practice at home. They can practice several hours a day. And if any of you have never experienced an immersive language experience, one of the fastest ways to learn a language is go to a foreign country, go live with someone who doesn't speak your language and they only speak their language. And if you're there for a month or two, boy, you're getting really good, really fast at that native language in that country because you've immersed yourself in it and you're getting what we call high intensity, high frequency, very clear specificity of instruction, and you're hitting the basic elements first and the more advanced elements later. And interestingly, those concepts of high intensity, high frequency, high specificity, developmental hierarchy, and the last one is with enough duration, those are 5 elements that relate to learning anything. Those elements will drastically change your rate of learning and mastery, which is why we say if you're trying to get specialized services, don't settle for 2 days a week for 30 minutes. That will slow down any instruction. I don't care if it's bike riding. Any instruction that has low intensity and low frequency means you've slowed down the learning rate. That's not optimal for the brain to build new wiring, new connections, and build these more functional skills. So the more practice per day, more days per week. Of course, there's a point to where it's going to be, exhausting and oversaturating. But I don't really think anyone ever gets to the point where they're trying to do 7 hours a day of Duolingo. An hour a day or whatever, you're going to start building those language skills.
Well, all 3 of my boys, we went to a charter school, and this is not a paid plug for a charter school or anything else. They went to a charter school that was here in Texas that does 3 languages. English, Mandarin Chinese, and
Wow.
Spanish.
Wow.
And my youngest, as a kindergartner, first grade, sorry, he was learning Mandarin Chinese and Spanish all at once. They would have one day a week that all lessons were taught in each language. And then he would come back and he would have, as much as a first grader can have a conversation, he would have conversations with my friends from Brazil or from Mexico or from Spain, and they would comment about how amazing his dialect was, his
Wow.
articulation, because he was being taught by people that were from that country.
Nice.
Like this charter school brought in a bunch of people from Spain or Portugal
Yeah.
and was teaching them all in Spanish.
Fascinating.
So, but yes, that was a very quick way of them learning a second or third language.
Gotcha. So let's hit learn to read Duolingo. This one says it's actually for kids who are 4 plus, but it also says it's made for ages 0 to 5. So I'm not quite sure what that really means. And I didn't get a chance to ask Mr. Harris about that, but it's got 2,900 ratings. It's got 4.3 stars, and it's got bite-sized lessons to help kids learn the alphabet, learn their phonics, learn some sight words, build some vocabulary. They also include some multisensory activities such as tracing, dragging and dropping, and they're getting some visual motor activities going on along with the actual reading activities. So they've got interactive stories that teach kids to begin to learn how to read, and they hope it's going to build some fluency. Some of their stories are really engaging with imagery, and others are reading aloud to kids, and they're highlighting each spoken word as it's read along. So they conceptualize that as using multisensory learning. Now, I have to always caution people about this philosophy that multisensory is always better. And I say that in a very candid way to help explain that that's not always true. And I'll say to educators many times, I say, so is multisensory instruction always going to lead to better learning? And they're like, oh yeah, 100%. If you visual, auditory, tactile, kinesthetic, build that multisensory system. I said, well, but it depends on if you're trying to just memorize something and memorize and store it, or if you're really trying to build the sensory system that builds those skills when people don't struggle to learn it. So the example is, if I have a child shaking their leg up and down while they're reading books, will they be better at reading? They're like, well, no, because shaking your leg has nothing to do with reading. I said, exactly. But that's actually multisensory. Shaking your legs, giving you some tactile kinesthetic feedback of your leg, bounce it up and down, bounce it up and down. But it has nothing to do with reading. So in that context, multisensory isn't always better. So in the other context, and we get to Lip Letterland as well, we'll talk about what builds your phonological system. Well, it's part auditory and it's part visual, but we know from laser eye tracking studies and other, it's also part mouth movement and mouth contact, teeth, tongue, and lips. What are they touching? So it's actually typical readers are building 4 sensory systems together. And those 4 sensory systems are the multisensory system that typically builds that phonological system. Here's a good analogy, Stephen. There's a fascinating study done in London at the MRC by a researcher named Montgomery, and she was a student of a famous psychologist named Uta Frith, Dr. Frith. And she had this unique idea that she wondered, because we were thinking that phonological skills, which are the early sound-based skills before reading, or we know it's part acoustic because you hear the sounds of your language, but we know it's part visual because you're watching what's happening when people are talking to you. But do we know if it's actually tactile, kinesthetic in the mouth, touch and movement in the mouth or not? And so she decided to test it. She devised this really great test with 8 to 10-year-olds. She said a sound, the child said the sound back to her, and then she showed them 3 pictures of the mouth in like a side view. And one picture showed the tongue up behind the front teeth, like tapping behind the front teeth and coming down. One picture showed the tongue going up in the back of the mouth, hitting the back of the mouth. One picture showed the tongue sticking out between the teeth, so then what she did was, why they've got the pictures there, first she said a sound. She said, and then she showed them the picture. Or she said, and then she showed them the 3 pictures. She said, which picture matches how your mouth moved? And she went through a whole bunch of different consonant and vowel sounds. The 2 groups in this study were a group of kids who had no reading difficulties and a group of kids who really struggled to read. Amazingly, the kids who had no reading difficulties were 90 to 100% correct on saying, oh yeah, it's that picture. My tongue was sticking up to my teeth for that TH sound. Oh no, it's that picture because my tongue's going up behind my teeth for that T sound like in a letter T, or the G sound in the letter G. And so these kids had no doubt exactly how their mouth was moving when they made just those single sounds. The other group of kids were 8 to 10-year-olds who all had dyslexia. And she did the same thing, one-on-one. She said the sound, they said the sound back. Their mouth just made the movement. She showed them the 3 pictures and which picture matches how your mouth just moved. Now, what they did not give any of these kids was a mirror or a video screen. They couldn't see their own mouth. So they had to use what we call tactile kinesthetic or tactile proprioceptive feedback of where's my teeth, where are my tongue, where are my lips when I make these sounds. And amazingly, that group of kids who had reading problems were worse than guessing. They're about 40% correct at picking out the picture. So research like that helps us understand that, yeah, multisensory is better, especially if it's tied to models of how the brain typically builds that skill. So a better way to build phonological processing is part visual, part auditory, but it's also part oral, tactile, and oral kinesthetic. And at the end, when we get to that Lip Letterland app, we'll talk about why we think that app is going to prevent kids from mixing their B's and D's. It's a really powerful piece of that app itself. So with that in mind, Stephen, other thoughts about Read to Learn, Duolingo ABC?
So I was just going to see if you would talk a little bit more about really quick when it talks about, making the letter H and dragging it on there. Talk about when that is appropriate. I know that you were kind of talking about it just now, but this is beneficial, but in the right scenario or in the right place.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and so what I think you're talking about is those visual motor skills.
Right.
And when do we want to be building those visual motor skills? And this is why, another reason why the American Academy of Pediatrics is right. We don't want kids on screen time before the age of 3. We don't want them to be drilled with, my baby can read flashcards and sitting in a high chair. You want them playing, engaging, interacting, climbing, doing sports activities, doing craft activities with crayons and paper and crayons and pencil, whatnot, because you're then giving that sensory input to begin to build better finger control and better visual perception. And then the visual and the finger have to go together to be able to form letters. But we really want to build the speech sounds first and go to the letters second. Because what we've learned from the brain and a very famous developmental psychologist, Piaget, is kids learn concrete things first, abstract things later. And what's abstract about sounds is the shape of the letter. There's no reason why the letter B has the shape it has. There's no reason why the letter A has its shape. The shapes have nothing to do with what sound comes out of your mouth. And so those are kind of abstract parts of sounds. But the sound, what your mouth looks like, what you hear coming out, and how your mouth is moving are actually more neurologically or more concrete sensory and motor parts of sounds. So getting your hand and doing the letter shapes, that's going to be a little bit later in the alphabet piece of it, but it's going to be really early in the finger control, the pencil grip, the crayon grip, the feeding skills, the pincher grip. There's all kinds of fine motor skills we want to be building through regular activities first before we get to school activities.
All right. Awesome. Well, let's move on to our next app here.
Yep. Let's go to ABCmouse reading and math games.
So let me tell you a quick story about this. It's kind of funny. I just got a new Android tablet, new Galaxy tablet. I'm sitting there setting it up, and it's taking you through all the different apps that you can automatically download, and one of them, ABCmouse, was one of the automatic downloads.
Yeah, great marketing and advertising. Yeah.
Yep. So,
well, and the funny thing about it is I wanted to name our app ABC Mouth. And I thought, it's so close to ABC Mouse, we might get into a lawsuit. We better stay clear of that one. But I think it's a great name, ABC Mouse. But I love the combination that we're going to talk about with Lip Letterland. Is it's really about the ABCs and the mouth. Those are unique pieces that come together. But ABC Mouse itself is designed for kids really in the age ranges of 4 and above. It's got 915,200 ratings and 4.5 stars. That's a lot of ratings and a lot of stars. So clearly it's like the top seller. And I think many parents are like, look, I'm paying $15 a month for this. I hope my kid's using it. And yeah, they've got lots of different price points. They have all different ranges of what you can buy, subscriptions, choices. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 10 different pricing points. It's a lot to think about before you download the app and get started.
I mean, look at that. 36 million plus families have downloaded this game.
Yeah, crazy. Which is, kudos to them. They've built an educational activity for kids. But again, as a parent and as a developmental brain specialist, I'm always going to tell you, but it's better if you play the app with the kid. It's better if you let them show you what they're doing. They can answer questions about it. They can talk to you about it, because then you're engaging speaking and interpersonal skills and some mom or dad time, and it makes the app more effective. Don't think the app should do all this work by itself. Join your kids in the interaction, join them in the play, join them in the discovery. They want you to see that they can accomplish this. They want you to praise them for what they are accomplishing, and it gives it value that you want to spend time with them, that, hey, this is something mom or dad thinks is really important. And they're actually the more likely to play the app as well, which is some beneficial pieces too. But
they've got some great, much like all the apps we're talking about, they've done an amazing job on the graphics, and they're all very entertaining.
Yes.
Which makes, I mean, as we know from having kids, that's the most important part, because if kids aren't entertained, they're not going to do it.
Yeah. And let me tell you, entertain, I mean, ABCmouse says they've got 10,000 learning activities in this app. That is a lot of activities. They've got STEM subjects to reading. They've got art. They've got social studies. Your child can grow in all kinds of subjects while they play ABCmouse. And so it's got lots of activities, but it's also more like classroom instruction. They're trying to teach them content, teach them concepts. The parents can actually choose 3 different subjects and what grade level you want your kids to be practicing at. And then the grade level can be adjusted up or down over time as well, as the students are performing, to try to help avoid frustration. You don't want to set the grade level too high that the child feels like they're never getting enough things right. And there's all kinds of incentivizations or gamifications, animations, all those pieces that help keep the kids more engaged and keep them going. And it's got some gentle corrective feedback sometimes as well. And if the game really kind of pauses, it looks like the kid doesn't know what to do. At some levels, the game will kind of jump back in and try to help out and try to, they know if they got to keep you engaged. If the child feels completely frustrated by it, then they're just going to turn it off. So lots of good ideas in how they're using these skills. And the newest version actually asks to use your microphone if you want some AI interaction in the upgraded version, which I'm assuming, because I haven't seen it, means there's going to be a little bit more dialogue going back and forth, where it might be recognizing some of your speech and what you're saying, and the words that you're saying. So it looks like ABCmouse is jumping right ahead into the AI generation of products as well. And that means it should become an even stronger app than it already is. And again, these are apps that focus on multiple structures, multiple contents. It's not reading only, even though it's called the Reading and Math Games app. It has a lot of other content in there besides just reading and math. Stephen, we miss anything about ABCmouse?
Yeah, the piece that I really liked, much like Khan Academy has this, also the tracking of progress.
Yeah.
For us parents, that's, and for me as a parent, that's one of the most important parts. I'm not just giving my kid a tablet or a device and an app just to babysit them or put them in watch them while I can go do any other things. I want to know that whatever I'm having my kids engage with is actually working.
Yeah.
There's some benefit to it other than just screen time. So, the tracking of the progress to me is a big plus.
Absolutely. That gives the parents some feedback. They know what's happening, especially if you're paying for the app. And I should have pointed out, 2 of the apps we've talked about so far are actually free. Khan Academy Kids and Duolingo Learn to Read ABC, those are both free. There's no subscription. There's no cost for it. So even families who might have limited financial means, you can get access to some pretty powerful learning tools. But again, don't just turn your kid loose with the iPad or the iPhone and hope that they're going to figure it out on their own, or Android, whichever thing you're using. Work with them. Spend even 20 minutes together. Will have a much bigger impact on your child's educational experience than if you just give them the app and walk away. The apps are not designed to be babysitters. You won't see much progress out of that. You'll see your kids actually not learning to engage as much, not building as good a language skills if the parents are not there engaging with them. So our last one on the list, Homer, fun learning for kids. And I really do not know who Homer is. I guess Homer is the cat, but I also, for some reason, when I hear Homer, it makes me think of Homer Simpson. I'm like, I don't see the Simpsons on this app, so it's a different company. But Homer also has a lot of price points, from as low as, I think the lowest is $7.99 all the way up to $59.99. It's got 24,600 ratings and 4.4 stars. And like the others, it's ranked for 4+, and some of the ones are actually for 0 to 5 it lists as well. But its method is developed by experts with a research base. They've got like a 4-step approach to try and go beyond rote memorization, to try to build confidence, build some problem solving, and foster some lifelong love of learning. That's one of the stated goals by the builders of this app itself. And it doesn't say how many, but it says it's got thousands of interactive lessons, and 1,000+ interactive lessons, what you see right there on the screen. Whereas ABCmouse said, no, we got 10,000+. We're killing it. But the interactive lessons, they're games, there's stories, there's songs, and then you've got preschool and kindergarten activities. You've got learning games for kids that improve their reading, their math, creativity levels in a fun way. And then you've also got the focus on, it's more like a classroom instruction. And so what Homer Fun Learning and for kids is it's got graphics that are really entertaining. Its main focus does seem to be more of a visual memory, kind of looking and learning, and which is fine for some kids, but other kids don't really have the best visual memory system. And practicing the system that's actually weak doesn't always make it stronger unless the practice is the right developmental level. If you practice too high, the skills don't get better. It's kind of like saying if you have trouble doing addition and subtraction, well, then there's no point working on multiplication because you're still struggling lower level skills. The higher level skills aren't going to help build the lower level skills. So you have to try and figure out where you're supposed to be, what's going to give you the best impact on what the kid's working on. It does attempt to provide some letter and sound practice. It does attempt to try to help kids to sound things out a little bit. It's a little bit of phonics, a little bit of phonological skills. And it doesn't try to include what we call some speech to print concepts by doing print to speech association. Speech to print means sounds going to letters, but they're doing it by going from letters down to sounds. So that's what we call print letters down to speech. It's the reverse of how the brain builds these skills. Every language in the world, you speak it first and you learn how to read and spell it later on. So it's always a spoken system precedes the written system.
And I think, if I can jump in there real quick, I think that's really hard for the general public, parents, grandparents, to understand, because that's the way that we've been taught, since school's been around, right? So we've always been taught that, A is a, or, E is E or eh, right? So they've always been taught those sounds and letters together. So it's really hard for parents and non-educator, well, even educators, to realize that how backwards that is, to go ahead and add in the shape or the object that is going to tell you what that sound is.
Right.
So, breaking that bad habit, breaking that misconception is really, really hard.
Yeah.
Because it's just one of those, that's the way we've always done it. So nobody really understands that it's more than just the science of reading.
Right.
It's more than we do it this way because we've always done this way, and somebody at one point thought that that was the way to do it. And what is the science of learning? How does the brain actually learn?
Right.
If we didn't have the little red schoolhouse, right?
Yeah.
How would the brain learn?
Yeah.
So that's what we really need to concentrate on when we're talking about our education system, our educational programming, our curricula that we're our tax dollars are buying, or even like what we're talking about here, the apps that we're purchasing for our kids. So we really want to make sure that we're asking all these pertinent questions. And that's the reason why we keep going back to
Yeah.
this is how the brain learns. And it only learns this way.
Absolutely.
It learns in these specific orders, or it finds a workaround to try to get past that particular activity.
100%.
So the thing that we go back to is just because our brains don't have that ability right now does not, and we make that workaround. That's that strategy or those just guess or sound it out or can you figure it out? All of that type of learning, that is nothing more than a survival mechanism. And it does not mean that we don't need to go back to the very beginning and learn what the sound is first,
Right.
then bring the shape or the object to associate that sound with, and then move on with our learning.
Yep. All great points about understanding how the brain works. There's the science of reading is only as good as your knowledge of the science of learning. And unfortunately, the science of reading many times is a list of ingredients with no recipe. It's like, okay, you need to have these 5 things, and we're not going to tell you how to do them. You go figure that out. Well, that doesn't make the chances best for the teachers to be most successful. So we're jumping into the next app, and this is the one that Stephen and I and the Now Programs company has developed. It's called LipLetter Land. And unlike the other 5 apps you just talked about, it does not do a world of things. It does one explicit thing very well with a very targeted focus, with a really strong basis on the developmental neurology of how the brain builds literacy skills. So the 5 apps you just talked about, any work they did with letters and sounds and words is pretty much going to do letters first and down to sounds later on. That's not at all what Lip Letterland is going to do, because we know that babies start building sounds by 8 months of age. They start perceiving your mouth movements. They're actually watching mom and dad's mouth by 8 months of age. They then start to babble. They start to move their own mouth, and they start to hear the sounds coming out of their mouth, and they start to see mom and dad's mouth. So they actually start wiring visual plus auditory plus oral tactile, which is touch, plus oral kinesthetic, which is movement. And they start mapping these 4 systems together to begin to actually be able to build what's happening to build that speech processor. So Lip Letterland is designed for kids ages 3 to 6 for the most part. It's also, and we're very proud of this, it's the lowest priced app of all the apps here that actually have a fee. Schools who are part of Apple's discount program, they're educational partners, and they do a bulk download. Schools can actually get this app for 50 cents a month per kid, basically like $6.25 a year. 12 months, it's a $6.25 investment per kid to have a year of access to this app, and it tracks each kid's progress. Now, like the marquee says here, you're going to master reading through sounds and letters, but also mouth movements. And that's why over here on the right side, we get this funny little mouth with an octopus above it. Amazingly, this app's going to actually help prevent kids from having B and D confusion. And here's why. It's going to ask the kids to figure out which sounds have your lips moving and which sounds have your tongue moving. Well, if you know that the letter B, when you go, ba, your lips come together, your lips pop apart, the app's going to ask kids a question, help them figure it out. Hey, is that a lip popper? Is that a smile sound? Is that an open sound? And they begin to realize, oh, my lips are popping when I say ba. And again, there's no letters yet. We're just using animated mouth movies. Later on, they're going to learn that when you go duh, hey, it's not your lips popping. It's your tongue going up and tapping. And they'll begin to learn in this app that that's actually called a tongue tapper. Later on, at the very last stage, the app then brings in letters. Once you know the auditory properties of the sounds, what it sounds like, you know what it visually looks like in the mouth, you know what parts of the mouth are moving or how they're moving, we know a name for it, and we've got the animated video. Now we're ready to add the letters to those 4 parts you've already learned. And adding letters to a 4-way discrimination system means the letters are being added to a much stronger system to actually be able to separate and build out what the mouth is doing. So the best way I can show you is just give you a quick preview. This is going to take us about 4 or 5 minutes. It's going to go through really quickly through several stages of Lip Letter Land. Let's roll that one and we'll watch it real quickly and come back.
Welcome to Lip Letter Land. Let's explore letters and sound and the mouth movements they make together. Stuffed animals are hiding all over Lip Letter Land. Let's go find them together. Along the way, we can talk about letters, sounds, and their mouth movements. Press the arrow to continue. Let's get started. Now listen and watch closely. E. Now you try it. Look at your screen and say E. Is the mouth smiling like this? Or is the mouth tight, round mouth like this? You're right. Your mouth smiles when saying E. We need a name for the sound E. Since your mouth smiles, do we call it smile sound? Or open sound? Great job! E is a smile sound because our mouth smiles. Listen and watch closely. E. Which mouth matches the sound E? Is it? Or is it? Which mouth moves like E? Great job! This mouth matches the sound E. Nice work! You found a stuffed animal! Watch how this mouth moves. Which sound does it make when your mouth smiles? Is it ooh, or ah, or e? Great job! E is the sound when your mouth smiles. This is the letter O. O makes the sound ah. For the letter O. Ah. Is the mouth smiling? Or is the mouth big and open? You're right. Your mouth is big and open when saying the letter O. Sound ah. Listen and watch closely. Ah. Which letter says ah? Great job! O says the sound ah. Ready? Look at this letter O. Which sound matches the letter O? Is it ooh, or ah, or e? Great job! The letter O says ah. You did it! You learned this letter.
All right, so what we've got there is we've got Lip Letter Land. trying to build that early phonological processor first. It's part visual, it's part acoustic, it's parts of the mouth touching and positioning, it's part awareness of feeling your mouth getting to those positioning. And you practice these four first before we actually get to the letters. The letters come at the very end because that's what typically happens for kids who don't have reading problems. In age 0 to 4, they're learning all the sounds, all the movements, they're saying it back to you, you're speaking to them. And again, we know that by 8 months of age, most kids are looking at mom and dad's lips and watching them move. So they really start building this speech processor, or what we call phonological awareness, at a very young age. That's why it's really important you do not give the 12-month-old a screen, because they need to be looking at your mouth. They need to be watching you talk to them, and you talk and they try to talk back, and you want to keep building those skills over time. So we've got this app, and we just did a press release yesterday. Stephen, I'm happy to say that press release got picked up by 650 media outlets, including Yahoo Finance and the Associated Press, as a press release. And it got distributed out to an estimated total of 209 million people. Because this app right now today, it's priced at $6.99 a month if you just want to do a monthly subscription. And by the way, that allows you to have 4 different kids practicing the app. So it's basically $1.75 per kid per month. Unless you buy the annual subscription, then it's $49.99, and then you're actually getting it for closer to a buck a month for the kid. So pricing should not be an object for most people. If you get your school to buy it, your school can pay either 50 cents or $1 a month per kid. There's different ways they can structure it, but they get a 50% discount. That's why the pricing comes out a little bit different for schools. And as much as I'd like to say it's because we're altruistic and just trying to give stuff to schools, actually Apple forces you to do it. Apple makes you give the schools a 50% discount. And Apple, just for full transparency, Apple takes 40% of your revenue from the price of the app. So 40 cents on every dollar doesn't go to the app developers. It goes back to Apple for supporting the platform, the store, all those kinds of things. Now, Kimberly had a great question, and she's been waiting really patiently for this one. Oh, sorry, not that one. She has a great question about how's the Android version coming along for LipLetter Land. I'm happy to tell you, Kimberly, it's in production. This is week 2 of production of converting the iPhone LipLetter Land app into the Android version. So I'm hoping within the next 4 to 6 weeks, we're releasing it in the Play Store, the Google Play Store, and you've got access to the Android version. Same pricing, same goals, but the goal is really, this is the pre-literacy app that comes before every app we showed you today. Because all the apps we showed you today are print letters going down to sounds. And we're going the reverse. We're going sounds first, and visual plus sound, and visual plus sound plus motor movements, and then we're going to letters later, because that is the proper developmental hierarchy of how the brain builds speech processors. Stephen, what do you think? You're a man with dyslexia, just like I'm a man with dyslexia. We both have gotten this instruction, but not from an app. What if we had had this when we were 3, 4, and 5? What do you think that would have done for us?
Well, I definitely think when you take the bottom up approach, when you take the phonemic awareness, make sure that system is completely solidified and working correctly before you start moving on to the phonics and letters and then building into actual reading. I think we would catch a lot of our dyslexics a lot earlier.
Yeah.
In school, and I don't think you would have near as many problems in school if you start building out the instruction or the actual learning, the science of learning. If you build that out from the very beginning,
Yeah.
you're not going to have to pay that piper once you get to 3rd to 5th grade.
100%.
Now you're really battling not only the disability, but you're battling the social emotional piece of what has happened with that child between kindergarten and where they're at 3rd, 5th, whatever. So, one of the things, as you were talking about the difference in letter to speech or speech to letter, I would just say you go into any K2 classroom in America, And if they're doing spelling tests, look at what the kids are doing when they're doing the spelling words. What are they doing? They're mouthing the sounds. They're not writing them in the air, they're mouthing them.
Right.
So, when I finally figured out the B's and D's, because I was one of those, what did I ever really think that, I mixed my B's and D's up and flipped them, and I mean that's what they said growing up. So I mean I didn't really see it,
Yeah.
but
Because if you could have seen it, you wouldn't have done it. So
right,
it's usually a lack of awareness that you're mixing B's and D's because you're not doing it on purpose. You're
right,
doing it because that wiring is not really accurately processing the letter symbol plus the sound.
right. So once I understood that, hey, if I can feel it with my mouth as I'm saying it and I can hear it, that changes everything.
Yeah.
At that point, and I tell people all the time, I use that example. I'm like, you'll never mix it up once you're able to feel it.
Right.
When I say able to feel it, you know what you're feeling.
And you eliminate all these strategies, all these accommodations. We don't need to do this to figure out which is the B, which is the D. We don't need to have it, right and left tattooed on your hands. Buh, my lips are popping, that's this one. Duh, my tongue is tapping, that's the D. And it eliminates the BD confusion because you built the perception of buh well before you even showed them the letters. You know that buh makes your lips pop. You know what buh sounds like. You know what it looks like when your lips pop. You know what it feels like when your lips pop. You've built this neurology of the phonological processor before you went to the abstract representation we call a letter. And it's not memorization. Unfortunately, we've seen some teachers be misled to say, hey, make a sound wall and give them a cue word for the sound and give them a picture to think of the sound. And it actually becomes a visual memory board. And you're actually just trying to get kids to, again, visually memorize that B says buh. But you've missed all this sensory information of the mouth about how Lip Letterland practices it. Sometimes it gives you a visual and asks for a sound. Sometimes it gives you a sound and asks for a visual. Sometimes it gives you a sound and asks for what parts are moving and how are they moving. Sometimes it gives you a name, lip popper, and asks you to pick the sound. So we're doing this very well explicitly developmentally designed practice to build those processors. So that then when we get to letters, it's going to be massively stronger. And the research study that preceded the building of this app was $1 million study with 5-year-olds. And it showed that when we took that sensory motor approach to building speech processing first and print later, that's that speech to print design, and we did steps beyond this app. This app stops at that point, doesn't go on to the others, but we go right there to the next one. And then you actually have to be able to connect the two together and make sure that you've got all the sensory motor pieces on target. And then you go to the actual alphabetic pieces. When we did that, plus the other stages of the program for that Now Foundations program, it's for speech, language, reading, and spelling, that research study showed that we could actually have more than 95% of kids reading on grade level. And we started that at the age 5. We need to wait to 3rd grade. And guess what? We wouldn't need to screen anybody because we've already prevented them from falling behind. So our real push to viewers, to parents with Lip Letterland is we're not really as keen about trying to get parents to buy the app. We'd really rather see the schools do massive downloads and get it into Head Start, get it into pre-K, get it into daycare programs, get it into kindergarten classrooms, 1st grade classrooms, because the more they're playing it early on, then the more kids will be better able to benefit from whatever reading curriculum the school has. So this is what we view as the premier speech to print and rock solid building those skills that you need for strong, accurate reading and spelling skills. That's all I got, Stephen. And we're pushed over an hour. How about you? You going to wrap it up?
Yeah. Well, yes, you can go out and purchase all these apps on your own, but like you were saying, for a lot of these apps, your school district may already own them. So, first off, if we're saying you're pre-kindergartner, you're not in the school system yet. Yes, go out and use these apps. However, I will also say go to your school district, find out if they have availability for you to put up or to get access to these apps. And if they don't have it, ask them to buy it.
Yeah, 100%. So what you're looking at right now is this is what it will look like when you get to the App Store, and then you'll be able to see it there. It looks a little bit different at first. It'll give you a small icon. You got to click on it to get to this bigger screen. But hopefully in 4 to 6 weeks, we'll be making another announcement that it's available for Android. We appreciate everybody joining us today. Lots of good feedback, input, thoughts, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for another Dyslexia Discussions podcast, where Steve and I will try to tackle another important topic for parents and educators and professionals who are trying to help support kids with learning difficulties or adults. We're looking at across the whole age span. Next week, we'll have another episode of Dyslexia Success Stories. That's our other podcast. And in that podcast, we're talking to people who've already been through successful empowerment of their dyslexia. By empowerment, we mean they've built their reading skills so strong, they're now grade levels above their current grade level. Or they actually got intervention when they're 8 and they're now 28. And they'll tell you what happened if they got fully successful intervention. And Stephen does a good job of pointing this out. So I always try to remember this, Stephen. If your child still doesn't spell well and they still make reading mistakes, your child has not had intervention. They've had some accommodations, they've had some specialized training, but full functional remediation, the child no longer makes reading mistakes. Full remediation, they should no longer make phonetic spelling mistakes. Full remediation, they're no longer mixing B's and D's, and they're no longer mispronouncing or misperceiving or misspeaking and saying they want to be pacifically clear, or they want to talk to you about that underlining problem, or they're really frustrated. They'd stop making those speech errors because you've successfully built that language processor and trained all those skills that come above it. That's the goal we want for parents and for educators with nowprograms.com, with the Morris Center, and with this new tool for teachers, for parents, and for adults. It's child is looking, yes, we'll get the adult version out later. You can have, Jenny the giraffe. It takes you through the tasks instead of Lucky the lion. But we want to see everyone exceed and succeed. Thanks again. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, Stephen. Thank you, technology guy.